Hello and welcome to another live lesson from the live English lessons that you have on your channel Dual Knowledge. As I always like to reiterate, these live lessons are a series of videos or a series of lessons that tackle English grammar. So my primary objective from this series of videos is at the end of the series I have covered all the aspects of English grammar. So it becomes some sort of a virtual reference or a digital reference, audio video, for all learners of English, whatever their purpose from learning English is, whether it's learning English for school, for uni, for immigration, or even for professional purposes, if they work in an English-speaking country, or even if they don't work in an English-speaking country, but they need English at work. In the previous lessons, we talked about verb to be, which is the most basic and the most important verb in English. We talked about the different forms of verb to be in the present and in the past. And in our live lesson yesterday, we talked about the first tense in the English 12 tenses. As I said in the previous lesson of yesterday, we have 12 tenses in English. So yesterday we explained thoroughly the first tense of these 12, which was the present continuous or the present progressive. And today we are going to discuss the second tense from the 12 tenses, and this is the present simple tense. Right, so when we talked about the present continuous yesterday, we said that the present continuous is used to talk about something temporary, meaning that we're talking about something that's happening right now at the time of speaking. So we say, I am learning, which means that the process of learning is going on, is happening right now as I speak. We can also say they are playing football. They are playing football, which means that the action of playing football is happening right now, at the moment, or at present. At present means now. So the present continuous is used to talk about an action that's happening right now at the time of speaking. We are in the middle of the action, and the action is of course temporary, meaning that it will last only for a limited period of time, and after that period is finished or is gone, the action will stop, the action will halt. But that's not the case with the present simple. With the present simple, what happens is that we talk about something that continues indefinitely. What do I mean by indefinitely? If something continues indefinitely, this means that this thing will continue for as long as it wants. I don't know exactly when it's going to stop. I don't even know if it's going to stop or not. What I know is that this fact or this situation will continue indefinitely. It will continue until a particular time in the future, or maybe even it will continue forever, I don't know. But its time of stopping is unknown to me. So when I say, for example, that the library opens at 9 in the morning, the library opens at 9 in the morning, that's something factual, that's something real or true, and it's going to continue indefinitely, meaning that I don't know if the library is going to change its opening time, or if it's going to change it when it's going to change it. This information is unknown to me. This means that the situation of the library opening every morning at 9 o'clock is a situation that's going to continue indefinitely. That's why we express it using the present simple by saying the library opens at 9 in the morning. So, when I talk about the usage of the present simple, the first usage is for things that continue indefinitely. The second usage for the present simple tense is to talk about habits. Habits are things that you do regularly. For example, when you say, Robert goes to the dentist twice a year. Robert goes to the dentist twice a year. That's a habit of Robert's. That's Robert's habit, is that he goes to the dentist twice a year, because the sentence here conveys the idea of having a habit done by Robert. We need to use the present simple. So we cannot say, for instance, Robert is going to the dentist twice a year. When we say is going, this means that we're using the present continuous, and the present continuous is not the tense to use when we talk about somebody's habits. But the right tense to use is the present simple. So we say that Robert goes to the dentist twice a year, which means that he goes to the dentist every 6 years. So the first usage of the present simple is to talk about something that continues indefinitely. The second use is to talk about habits and things or actions that you do regularly. The third usage for the present simple tense is to talk about facts. So when I say, for instance, the moon revolves around the earth, the moon revolves around the earth. So the verb revolves is conjugated in the present simple in this example because the sentence expresses a fact. It doesn't have to be a scientific fact, but in this particular example, it's a scientific fact which says that the moon as a celestial object, as an object in space, goes around or spins around or revolves around the earth. So we have to conjugate the verb in the present simple in this example by saying that the moon revolves around the earth. Right, so again, to sum up or to wrap up the three main usages of the present simple, these are to talk about things that continue indefinitely, to talk about things that happen as a habit, things that you do regularly, or to talk about facts. Right, so how do we make the present simple? Whenever we tackle the present simple, we need to tackle it in the three different types of sentences. These are affirmative sentences, which are the positive sentences, which are not negative. We also need to understand how to conjugate the verb in the present simple when the sentence is negative. So the negative sentences is the second type of sentences that we need to study when it comes to the present simple tense. And the last and the third type of sentence is the interrogative sentences, which is just a fancy word for saying questions. Right, so let's begin with the first type of sentences, which is affirmative sentences or positive sentences, sentences which are not negative. Well, in order to conjugate the verb in the present simple, you need to look at the subject. The subject is the person or the thing performing the action. So the person or the thing that performs the action is the subject, and in English, subjects most probably come at the beginning of the sentence, especially if we are talking about statements or declarative sentences, which are positive or affirmative and negative sentences. So, talking about affirmative or positive sentences, in order to conjugate the verb in the present simple, we need to look at the subject of the sentence, which is coming at the beginning of the sentence most of the time. If this subject is he or she or it, any of these three personal or subject pronouns, or any noun that's equivalent to them, so instead of saying it, for example, you say the cat. Instead of saying she, it can be Kate. Instead of saying he, it can be, for example, Alan, okay? So if the subject is he or she or it, we need to add to the verb one of these three endings, s or es or ies. Right. So if you find that the subject in the sentence is he or she or it, and you add to the verb s or es or ies, this means that the verb has been conjugated in the present simple tense. And if the subject of the sentence is any other subject pronoun or personal pronoun, which are I, we, you, and they, I, we, you, they, if the subject of the sentence is any of these pronouns or any other noun equivalent to them, then we are going to use the bare infinitive of the verb or the base form of the verb, which means the verb without adding anything to it. So, the question is, as we said, if the subject of the sentence is he or she or it, we said that we need to add either s or es or ies to the verb. But the question is, when should we add what? Like, can I add s or es or ies just all the time? Or is there a particular ending for each situation? Of course there is. So, if your verb ends with a y, with the letter y, and the letter just before the y is a consonant, which means it's not a vowel, it's not one of the 5 vowel letters, a, e, I, o, and u, in this case, what you need to do is to omit or remove or take out the y at the end of the verb, and you put ies. For example, a verb like try. So this verb is spelled T-R-Y, meaning that the last letter is Y and the letter before it is a consonant, which is R. So in order to conjugate this verb with he and she and it in the present simple, what you need to do is to remove the Y and put ies. So the verb becomes he tries, she tries, it tries, and the spelling of tries is T-R-I-E-S. T-R-I-E-S. Another example for the same case is the verb carry. Carry. The spelling of that is C-A-R-R-Y or C-A-R-R-Y. So as you can see, the letter before the Y is a consonant, which is the letter R. So in order to conjugate the verb or to make the verb in the present simple with he or she or it or any noun equivalent to them, you change it into carries. Carries. This is done by removing the Y at the end of the verb and then replacing it with IES. So it becomes he carries, she carries, it carries, and the spelling of carries is C-A-R-R-I-E-S. Right, so now we know what is the case in which we need to use or to add IES to the verb with he and she and it. The second case is when to add ES. Well, if your verb ends in any of the following endings, it takes ES in the present simple with he and she and it. These endings are SS, SH, CH, X, and O. Again, SS, SH, CH, X, and O. If your verb ends in any of these 5 endings, then what you need to do is to add ES to it in order to make it in the present simple with he and she and it. Let's take some examples. A verb like pass. Pass. This is P-A-S-S. So for he and she and it, it becomes passes. P-A-S-S-E-S. Another verb ending in SH is wash. Wash. That's W-A-S-H. In the present simple with he and she and it, it becomes washes. W-A-S-H-E-S. es. Another example is catch. Catch. This is a verb which ends in ch, the spelling of which is C-A-T-C-H. C-A-T-C-H. So it ends in ch, which is one of the 5 endings we talked about. So to conjugate it in the present simple with he and she and it, we need to add es to it, so it becomes catches. C-A-T-C-H-E-S. And the last example in this category or in this class of verbs is the verb go. Go is spelled G-O. It ends with one of the endings, which is O. So to conjugate it with any of the pronouns he or she or it, we need to add es, so it becomes goes, which is spelled G-O-E-S. So we have tackled 2 possibilities now. When do we add ies to the verb? When the verb ends in a y and the letter before the y is a consonant, not a vowel. So we remove the y and we put ies. Examples: try, carry, study. The second case is if the verb ends in one of the following 5 endings: ss, sh, ch, x, and o. If the verb ends in any of these endings, we add es to it if the subject is he or she or it. If the verb does not fall under any of these 2 categories, then we add s to it, just s. So if it, for example, ends in y preceded by, or the letter before it is a vowel, we just add s to it, just like enjoy. So the letter before the y is o, which is a vowel, so it becomes enjoys, E-N-J-O-Y-S. Another one like stay, stay, S-T-A-Y. So the letter before the y is the vowel a. With he and she and it, we just add s to it, so it becomes stays. But if the subject is not he or she or it, it's I or we or you or they or any noun equivalent to these subject or personal pronouns, to conjugate the verb in the present simple, what we need to do is to use the base form or the bare infinitive or form number 1 of the verb, which is simply the verb without adding any additions to it. So now I'll give you some example sentences highlighting the present simple in affirmative sentences or in positive sentences. I work in a shop. I work in a shop. My brother works in a bank. My brother works in a bank. Amanda lives in London. Amanda lives in London. Her parents live in Paris. Her parents live in Paris. It rains a lot here in winter. It rains a lot here in winter. I like big cities. I like big cities. The earth goes round the sun. The earth goes round the sun. You speak English very well. You speak English very well. It costs a lot of money to build a hospital. It costs a lot of money to build a hospital. A particular note that's worth mentioning here is when the subject of the verb is he and she and it, and the verb is have, we need to use the form of it, which is has. So if the main verb in your sentence is the verb have has 2 forms in the present simple. Just like verb to be, which we explained in lesson 3, in live lesson 3. We said back then that verb to be has 3 forms in the present simple. These are am for I, is for he and she and it, and are for we, you, and they. The same applies to verb to have. So verb to have also has two forms in the present simple, and these are have and has. So if your subject happens to be one of the pronouns he or she or it, or any of the nouns equivalent to them, you use the form has. Whilst if the subject is I, we, you, and they, or any of the nouns equivalent to them, you use the other present form of verb to have, and that's have. So you say, for example, Jean has a shower every day. Jean has a shower every day. Jean is a noun that's equivalent to the pronoun he. So we say Jean has. But we say the children have a shower every day. The children have a shower every day, because the children is a noun that's equivalent to the pronoun they. We use the second form of verb to have in the present simple, and that's have. There are certain expressions which we call adverbs of frequency. Adverbs of frequency, which are typically used with the present simple. So whenever you find any of these words in your sentence, you need to conjugate the verb in the present simple. These adverbs of frequency, from their name, they tell you about the frequency the action happens, which is the rate at which the action happens, how often the action happens. These adverbs of frequency are always, usually, often, sometimes, hardly ever, never. 6 of them. So let me say them again. Always, which means all the time. Usually, which means most of the time. Often, which means like 60% of the time. Sometimes, which means not very often. Hardly ever, which means almost never, and never itself. That's the least frequency, zero frequency. So whenever you find any of these adverbs of frequency in your sentence, most probably you will need to conjugate the verb in the present simple. For example, we say, Sue always gets to work early. Sue always gets to work early. As you can see, always is in the sentence. Sue means she, so we add to the verb s or es or ies. It's eat, so we add s to it. So it becomes Sue always, it's get, not eat. So Sue always gets to work early. We add s to the verb because the subject is Sue, which is a noun equivalent to she. I never eat breakfast. I never eat breakfast. As you can see, never is the adverb of frequency used in a sentence, which means zero frequency, something that doesn't happen at all. So we put the verb in the present simple. The subject here is I, so we use the base form or the bare infinitive of the verb, form number 1, the verb without adding anything to it. So we say, I never eat breakfast. We don't say, I am never eating breakfast. We don't say that. Further examples of using the present simple with adverbs of frequency include, we often go out at weekends. We often go out at weekends. Mark usually plays football on Sundays. Mark usually plays football on Sundays. I sometimes walk to work. I sometimes walk to work. As you can see in all of the examples we mentioned, the adverb of frequency is placed just before the verb. So we said always gets, never eat, often go, usually plays, sometimes walk. But if the verb in the sentence is verb to be, you have to place the adverb of frequency after it. So you say, for example, Sue is always active in the morning. Sue is always active in the morning. We don't say Sue always is active. because the verb here is verb to be, which is the word is. So we have to put the adverb of frequency after it. So it becomes Sue is always active in the morning. So if the main verb in a sentence is verb to be, then you place the adverb of frequency after it. But if it's any other verb apart from verb to be, then in this case we put the adverb of frequency right before the verb. So this is the first part of the present simple, which is how to make the present simple in affirmative sentences or in positive sentences. Now we shall move to part 2, which is how to make the sentence negative in the present simple. Well, we talked before about something in English that's called auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. And we said that auxiliary verbs are used in addition to main verbs in the sentence in order to change it into a negative sentence, or to change it into a question, or to make a tense. For example, when we talked about the present continuous, we said that it consists of am or is or are, that's verb to be in the present, followed by the present participle or the ing form of the verb acting as a verb. In this tense, the present continuous, am, is, and are, these are the auxiliary verbs of the present continuous, because you cannot make the present continuous without them. You need them in order to conjugate the verb in the tense, in order to make the tense. So in the present continuous, auxiliary verbs are 3, am, is, and are. For the present simple as well, in order to make the sentence negative, you've got to use an auxiliary verb. And the present simple has 2 auxiliary verbs. These are do and does. Do and does. So at the time we have 3 auxiliary verbs in the present continuous, which are, am, is, or is, are, and am. These are the auxiliary verbs or the helping verbs of the present continuous. Similarly, we have also auxiliary or helping verbs in the present simple, but we have only 2 of them rather than 3, and they are do and does. Does goes with he and she and it. So if your subject in the sentence is he or she or it, or any noun equivalent to these personal or subject pronouns, then the auxiliary verb that you need to do in negative sentences is doesn't or does not. If your subject happens to be any of the other subject or personal pronouns, and these are I, we, you, and they, then we use the other auxiliary verb, which is don't. So don't or do not goes with I, we, you, and they, or any noun equivalent to them. Doesn't or does not goes with he and she and it, or any noun equivalent to them. And there is a very important remark that we need to take care of when it comes to negating the present simple or making the present simple in the negative form. This remark is, whenever you use the auxiliary verbs do or does, don't or doesn't, you have to follow them with the bare infinitive or the base form of the verb, even if your subject is he or she or it or any noun equivalent to them. As we said when we were explaining the affirmative sentences in the present simple, we said that we use the base form or the bare infinitive only with I, we, you, and they. But for he, she, and it, we add to the verb either s or es or ies. Yeah, that's the case in positive or affirmative sentences. But when it comes to negative sentences, you need to use the auxiliary verb either don't or doesn't, and you follow it with the bare infinitive or the base form of the verb. That's the verb without adding anything to it. And at the same time, you do that even if the subject of the sentence is he or she or it. So now I'll give you some example sentences to underscore these ideas and to underline the ideas of negative present simple. So we say, for example, I don't drink coffee. I don't drink coffee. If we change I to she, it becomes she doesn't drink coffee. You cannot say she doesn't drinks. That's wrong. That's a fatal mistake. You don't say she doesn't drinks. You can say she drinks if the sentence is affirmative or positive. But if your sentence is negative, which means that you're using don't or doesn't, you have to follow it with the bare infinitive or the base form of the verb. So you say, I don't drink coffee, but you say she doesn't drink coffee. So we say I don't because don't goes with I, we, you, and they. But you say she doesn't because doesn't goes with he and she and it. More examples to highlight negative present simple are you don't work very hard. You don't work very hard. Or Sam doesn't work very hard. Sam, which is equivalent to he, Sam doesn't work very hard. You don't watch television very often. You don't watch television very often. Or you can also say Sarah doesn't watch television very often. Sarah doesn't watch television very often. It doesn't rain here much. It doesn't rain here much. My car doesn't use a lot of petrol. My car doesn't use a lot of petrol. Petrol is the British word for gas. In American English, they say gas, but in British English, they say petrol. That's the liquid that the car, or the fuel that the car needs in order to run or in order to operate. Sometimes he's late, but it doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen. Although it normally takes the verb with S or ES or IES, but because the sentence is negative here, we say it doesn't happen very often. We cannot say it doesn't happens very often. More examples. She doesn't speak Italian. She doesn't speak Italian. We cannot say she doesn't speaks Italian. And so on. All of these are examples to using the present simple in negative sentences, and this can be wrapped up or recapped in just two important sentences. In order to put your sentence in the negative of the present simple, you have to use an auxiliary verb. The two auxiliary verbs in the present simple are don't and doesn't. Don't goes with I, we, you, and they, and doesn't goes with he and she and it. And whatever the auxiliary verb or the helping verb you're using is, in all cases, you have to follow it with the base form or the bare infinitive of the verb. That's the verb without adding anything to it. It's form number one of the verb. Now we shall move on to the third and the last section of today's lesson about the present simple, which is how to make the present simple in interrogative sentences. When I say interrogative sentences, as I said in the beginning of the session, it's just a fancy word which means questions. It's quite similar to negative sentences. In this type of sentences, questions or interrogative sentences, we also need to use auxiliaries because auxiliaries are used to make negatives and to make questions. So, in order to make a question in the present simple tense, you need to use does or do. These are the two auxiliary verbs of the present simple. If your subject is he or she or it, use the auxiliary verb does. If your subject is I, we, or you, or they, use the helping verb or the auxiliary verb do. If you begin your question with does or do, This means that your question is a yes or no question, meaning that it has to be answered either with yes or no. Similarly or likewise, just like we followed don't and doesn't with the bare infinitive of the verb or the base form of the verb, also when we are making a question, whether this question is a yes or no question or a WH question, in both cases you have to follow do and does in the questions with the bare infinitive or the base form of the verb. For example, you say, do you play tennis? Do you play tennis? As you can see, we are starting our question here with do. So this is a yes or no question because it starts with the auxiliary verb, do. So, do you play tennis? We cannot say does you play tennis because you goes with do. It doesn't go with does. Do you play tennis? Two possible answers. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Or no, I do not. So, do you play tennis? Yes, I do. No, I do not. Does Gary work hard? Does Gary work hard? Gary is a man's name, so it's equivalent to he. That's why we're using the auxiliary verb does, because he and she and it, they go with does. So does Gary work hard? Yes, he does, or no, he doesn't. Either you say yes, he does, or no, he doesn't, or no, he does not. So if you begin your question either with do or does, as we said, this means that your question is a yes or no question. It has to be answered either with yes or no. But this doesn't deny the fact that your question in the present simple could be a WH question, meaning that it's not answered with yes or no. It begins with a WH question word and it doesn't take yes or no as an answer. The WH question words include when, where, what, why, which, who, whose, whom, and how. 9 of them. Let me say them again. The WH question words are the words that you begin your WH question with one of. These are what, why, where, when, which, who, whose, whom, and also we add how to them, although how doesn't begin with WH, but it's considered to be one of the words which make up WH questions. So you can have your present simple question as a WH question, meaning that it's not beginning with do or does, it doesn't take yes or no as an answer, it's answered with a piece of information. For example, you can say, where does your sister live? Where does your sister live? So because the subject here is your sister, which is equivalent to the pronoun she, we have to use the auxiliary verb does. We cannot say, where do your sister live? We can say, where do your sisters live? Because your sisters, that's plural equivalent to the pronoun they. So we can say, where do your sisters live? But if we're talking about only one of your sisters, or if you only have one sister, so we say, where does your sister live? Where does your sister live? We cannot say, where does your sister lives? We cannot say so, because after do and does, and also after don't and doesn't, we have to use the bare infinitive or the base form of the verb. So we say, where does your sister live? Rather than, where does your sister lives? There is a rule in English that says, the tense of the question needs to be the same as the tense of the answer. So if the question is in the present continuous, the answer needs to be in the present continuous too. If your question is in the present simple, then your answer needs to be in the present simple as well. So in this question that we have just said, which is, where does your sister live? That's a WH question in the present simple, so we need to answer it in the present simple as well. So we can say, my sister lives in France. My sister lives in France. I cannot say my sister is living in France, because this means that your answer is in the present continuous at the time the question was in the present simple, and that's wrong. You have to standardize the tense among the question and its answer. They need to have the same tense. So when the question is, where does your sister live? That's a present simple question. So the answer needs to be in the present simple as well by saying she lives in France or whatever or wherever she lives. Right, so this was the last and the third section of today's live lesson about the present simple. We have tackled this extremely important tense in all the three different types of sentences: affirmative or positive sentences, negative sentences, interrogative sentences, which are also called the questions. In our next live lesson tomorrow, we shall be comparing and contrasting the two tenses that we have covered so far, the present simple and the present continuous. We are going to be comparing them to each other in order to understand the distinction between the two tenses, which one is used when, what are the usages for each of the two tenses, and how different are they in the meaning that they convey. Because when you use the same verb in the present continuous, it puts across a meaning that's completely different to the meaning it puts across if the verb is conjugated in the present simple. Also, in tomorrow's lesson, we will be talking about a quick lesson about something in English that we call have got and has got. Have got and has got. We will also be scrutinizing these briefly and concisely. We won't spend a lot of time on them because it's an easy and straightforward lesson, so it shouldn't take much or it shouldn't take long, and it doesn't take a lot of time from us. As usual, I'd like to ask you to support the channel if you like the content. Interact with it through liking, through sharing, and through subscribing to the channel. Leave any comments or suggestions in the comments box below. And it's always a pleasure to see you, whether it's in a recorded video or in a live session like that. So at the end, and in order to bring this live stream to a close, I'd like to thank you very much for your attentive listening. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. And goodbye for now.